and then we did a small group process exercise towards the end of the session to see and to show that how difficult change is. Do you recall it? And we used a participatory process uh, in which I think Sonal and we had one more participant, but he's not here today, uh, who facilitated the process in order to ask people to speak or to switch on their cameras. However, what we met with was some yeses and some resistance. So that is typically what happens when you start using a participatory process in order to bring about change in the entire organization. And OD therefore focuses on how can we uh, work with the entire system in order to make change happen, right? So this is where we were last time, and it uses behavioral science knowledge and group dynamics in order to bring about changes in the organization. And then based on the experience in of what had happened in the group, I shared with you that this is the first stage of any group formation, and uh, in order to break the ice, it is important to get people to talk and to share what their thoughts and feelings are around anything. So that's where we left last time. And I had shared with you that I'm going to be talking about the models of OD. So we are going to start today with the models of OD. So I once again humbly request you, kindly switch on your videos, please participate, and let us make it an interactive session. Otherwise, I have no problem. I can talk for 1.5 hours and I can go away. You to uh, be actively participating. All right. So I acknowledge that whatever I'm going to be sharing is from the theory, from the two books, Theory of Organization Development and Change by Thomas G. Cummings and Christopher Worley, and Organization Development by Wendell French and Cecil Bell Jr., and articles published on OD. So organization development, organization change, development and learning organizations. All OD change intervention strategies may lead to some form of organization learning, such as knowledge acquisition, gaining of insight, and habit and skill learning. Unfortunately, not all intervention strategies can result in the creation of a learning organization. A learning organization is an organization that seeks to create its own future, that assumes learning is an ongoing and creative process for its member, and one that develops, adapts, and transforms itself in response to the needs and aspirations of people both inside and outside itself. So such organizations, therefore, they seek to improve as a whole by proactively adopting organizational learning activities in order to effectively manage both internal and external change. So it is important that these two concepts, that is organization learning versus a learning organization. Now, in all organizations, learning happens whether or not it is planned learning. Uh, if you fail at something, you learn. If you succeed at something, you learn. But these learnings do not happen because you consciously wanted to create learning. So that's called organization learning. Like working in an organization creates learning, it creates experience. And learning organization is one that actively seeks to um, learn, and they create processes in which a planned change happens. So that is the difference between organization learning and learning organization. Now, the uh, what are the advantages with the creation of learning organizations? The advantages associated with the creation of learning organizations cannot be underestimated. It enhances the organization's capability to meet the ever-changing and complex needs of clients. It also gives organizations a sustained competitive edge over other organizations. In addition, successful translation of knowledge gained from continuous learning into new products and services can allow learning organizations to create a new source of wealth. In fact, it is argued that learning organizations are an important hallmark of OD efforts that distinguish the field from that of change management. So the end result of OD is that the organization, I told you last time also, it must become self-sustained, self-growing, and it must want to change rather than change being thrust upon them and willy-nilly learning. Now, a review of the models that typically underpin the OD processes is but a noble cause because it helps in growth, in profitability, in improving systems, so on and so forth. Now, there are two main theories or approaches to OD. One is the change process theory, and the other is the implementation theory. Now, the former concerns the dynamics of the change process as to how and why change occurs. Hmm? So, process is like what we were trying to do at the end of the last workshop. We were trying to look at the process of why people are not participating. Yeah. And people spoke of the apprehension. Some said we are sitting on our designations. Some said I'm at work and therefore I'm not able to actively participate. So change process would typically take these factors into account and move forward. And the second part of it is implementation of um, the implementation theory, that how am I going to implement this process and then going ahead with implementing the process. So the latter addresses how actions generate change and what actions can be taken to initiate and guide change. Each theory encompasses different categories of change theories, which are further comprised of many individual models. So a process of change concerns itself with the dynamics of change process. So today we are going to look at the change process theory, the dynamics of change. And we are looking at Kurt Lewin's model. It's a three-step model which was proposed by Kurt Lewin in 1947 as one of the four interrelated elements that comprise his planned approach to change. So, what Kurt Lewin spoke of was that we look at the present state, we unfreeze people from the present state, and we create the motivation to change. And then comes this state, transition state, in which we sow the knowledge and what is to be changed. And then we go on to stabilize and integrate the chain, which is called as the refreezing process. That is at the state at which you want people, the desired change to happen. So this is normally they use the analogy of an ice cube. So at the time when the ice is frozen and kept in trays, then they're all separate. But then when you take it out of the tray and it melts, then it has changed its form. And then you sow whatever needs to be sown into the minds of the people, and then you refreeze it. It's like something like sowing a seed in the soil. So first you will clean it up, because on a hardened uh, land, no new seed will go in. So, first of all, what are the apprehensions of people? What are their thoughts? What are their fears? What are their anxieties? What are their, what is their, their blockages? All that is sought to be in a laboratory situation. All that is sought to be first unfolded, cleansed, and then the new thought is sown, and then people are given an opportunity to experiment with it, to try it out, and then we say that it becomes a part of the habit process. So, like, say, for instance, somebody keeps telling you uh, that smoking is injurious. Smoking is injurious. You pay no attention to it. You're frozen in your habit. And then how do you create the motivation to change? Sometimes you show films, sometimes you tell stories, sometimes you make them meet people who are suffering as a result of the consequences, to heighten the need within the person to want to change. And then, because it is a process in which you can quickly go back to your old habits, so therefore interventions are made to stabilize and help the person to integrate the change so that it becomes a permanent feature. So these three stages are famously Kurt Lewin's uh, three-stage model, and it is used mostly in conducting of sensitivity laboratories, T group learning, what is called. And we start the micro lab where we do ice breaking exercises, help the person to go through whatever processes they are going to go through throughout the entire 5 days of the laboratory in which they are going to be together. That is talking of their feelings in the here and now and their thoughts, and then what feedback they have taken, what feedback has done to them, how they have changed as a result of it. Then they are put into the laboratory, and the group has the autonomy to lead itself in the direction of change, to bond together and to lead itself in the direction of change. And in this, people typically they disclose about themselves, and they see what impact their behavior is having through the feedback that they receive from other participants. And then once they make their own determinations or the action plan that this is how we are going to change, then they use the same forum within the T group to experiment with their uh, new behavior, and then they further receive feedback on that. So that's how the change process is brought about in the sensitivity labs. Now, I told you there were 4 interrelated processes. So the other 3 in Kurt Lewin's model is the field theory, the action research theory, and group dynamics. Group dynamics I've explained to you to some extent just now, and field theory is what I'm going to explain to you. So what Kurt Lewin said is that human behavior is the result of a dynamic balance of forces working in opposing directions. So what happens when I say that please switch on your cameras and please participate, there are 2 kinds of things which are happening. So some of us resist, some of us move, but why? So even within a person, I will do it now, I will do it later, I will do it now, I will do it later. Should I do it now? Should I do it later? I'm scared. No, I will, grow as a result of this. So human behavior is the uh, result of the dynamic forces which are working in opposite directions. That is what Kurt Lewin said. So it focuses on the conditions, the forces that drive or hinder behavior. According to the social scientists, human behavior is a result of a dynamic balance of forces working in opposite directions. So the 3-step model of field theory therefore assumes that a shift in the balance of these forces or conditions towards the direction of the planned change can bring about the desired changes. So when we reduce the factors which are causing resistance to the change and increase the factors which help us to change, then change will happen. So the driving forces, that is incentives, they facilitate change by pushing employees from their current behavior towards the planned change. And restraining forces, that is group norms, hinder change by pushing employees in the opposing direction. So, uh, so that status quo, or what he calls as quasi-stationary equilibrium state, is mentioned. Now, so what is the existing behavior? What is the problem situation? Or what is the status quo is referred to as quasi-stationary equilibrium state, right? So if we take this particular group of 12 people, we are 12 of us here. So really 10 students, I think. And if you see that uh, this is the situation right now, is that out of 12, I think there are 2 people, me and Polemy also, 3 of us, right? Who, okay, Arpita has come on. So 4 of us out of 10 who are, at least have their videos on. The remaining 6. So it is, this is the current situation now. And so there are some forces, some people who are willing to change, and some people who are not willing to change, and therefore they are maintaining the status quo of what we say as in this group, okay, so we have 5 people now, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this is what he called as the quasi equilibrium state, right? And in order for us to bring about a change, the forces which resist the change need to be lowered, and the forces which accept the change need to be increased. Is it okay? I think this is pretty much simple enough to understand. This is the field theory. So in the field, that how do we reduce the resisting forces? So to change that state, one can increase those forces which are uh, pushing for change and decrease those forces maintaining the current state, or apply some combination of both. For example, the level of performance of a work group might be stable because group norms maintaining that level are equivalent to the supervisor's pressure for change to higher level. This level can be increased either by changing the group norms to support higher levels of performance, or by increasing supervisor pressure to produce at higher levels. And Lewin suggested that modifying those forces, maintaining the status quo, produces less tension and resistance than increasing forces for change. Yeah. So, like if you see in organizations, I used to work in a public sector organization. So, when they want to change the production norms, so they first see where the resistances can come from. So, the first resistance that can come from is the supervisor, is the workers. And so how do you get people on board? Now, in order to change that, therefore, what they do is they hold meetings with the union leaders. And so it is not just one union, there will be multiple union leaders who are going to exert pressure on maintaining the status quo. Then the management creates an urgency for change about, and also tells that what is the incentive for change, how the workers benefit from it. They try to understand the in that negotiation meeting that how uh, the workers will benefit, what will be the payoff to the workers, what will be the incentive to the workers. And that way, they are able to reduce the resisting forces. And once they have built up the consensus of the, uh, through the leaders of the workers' union, then the production targets are set and the worker achievement norms are set, right? So this is what, that you modify those forces maintaining the status quo, and which produces less tension and resistance than increasing forces for change. Now, unfreezing is the first step. So in unfreezing, what do they do? It involves reducing those forces maintaining the organization's behavior at the present level. And unfreezing is sometimes accomplished through a process of psychological disconfirmation, which means that you introduce information that shows behavior discrepancies between behaviors desired by organization members and those behaviors which are currently exhibited. And then members can be motivated to engage in change activities. So even within the tree group, what happens is that people, when they describe themselves, they say, I'm this. And then as the discussion proceeds, we notice that there is an incongruence between what a person is saying and what the person is actually doing. So sometimes we have to confront people with that data, that you said this, however, I observed this, so what could be the reason for this? And when we are able to help a person to accept the fact that they are not walking their talk, then people reflect deeply. And in P groups, this is my experience. And then they are able to come back, if not immediately then, and exhibit that change in behavior, which then the group members, they verify in the next, that you were like this, but how you have changed. So sometimes it is necessary to confront people. It is necessary to confront people with the discrepancies in their behavior. And this is what causes the unfreezing behavior. Otherwise, what will happen? We will keep on seeing that, this person is not, is saying this normally in every day-to-day life. We see that a person is saying this, but is doing that. But we never confront. We may talk behind the person's back. But we never tell the person on the face, because that person may feel bad or whatever. But what happens is that the person does not get the chance to improve themselves and to change their behavior. So this data is mirrored back to them. And so this is the process of disconfirmation, that your behavior is not matching what you are saying, right? It's a very threatening process. By the way, I'm saying it pretty much easily. People really break down in tea groups. They start crying. Any of you have been through a tea group over here? Yes or no? At least you can write in your chat box. Kuch to karo yaar. No. Okay. So thank you, Sonal, for your response. So in a tea group, for instance, if I were doing a tea group for this particular group of people, so participation is a very important process in tea groups. So this issue, I would, as a facilitator, if I were to really be facilitating you in a tea group, uh, there would be several rounds of intervention. There we would keep helping people to come out with their inner self as to, okay, so what's happening in the group? Huh? So what's happening? We did this. We did a small piece of it last time. Huh? So what's happening? Till ultimately the entire group opens up to each other, right? So that is the process of unfreezing. Then we come to moving. So we say this step shifts the behavior of the organization, department, or individual to a new level. It involves intervening in the system to develop new behaviors, new values, and attitudes through changes in organizational structure and processes, right? It has been found that certain activities are necessary to implement the first two stages of the change project. So typically, like when I'm doing my international trainings, so we are supposed to um, uh, evaluate. Now, so what do? I can't go on. I don't have that kind of time in the international training to go on telling the participants, please participate, please switch on your video, do this, do that, keep cajoling them all the time. So what do? I create a structure. I create a process. So what is the structure and process I've created? That I put 30% marks for participation. Huh? And 30% is a big number for your certification. So that's the structure that I have created in order to make it happen, right? So, however, if we are doing a T group, we won't do that. We will encourage people to continue to look within themselves as to what is blocking them from participating and help them to reduce those factors which are blocking them and create a more participatory culture so that the group cohesiveness in the end increases, right? And people are participating in the change process very happily. Now, once we have done that, sorry, I was still talking to you about this. So you intervene to help them to develop new behaviors, values, attitudes through changes in structure and process. It has been found that certain activities are necessary to implement the first two stages of the change project. So it is not like so unstructured. There is a structure. So for instance, uh, when you participate in a T group, the facilitator tries to create norms. The first norm that the trainer tries, the facilitator creates is here and now. So what is happening to me in the here and now? Right? So again and again, the group, because they want to escape, the first stage is flight. क्योंकि उनको घबराहट होती है. They come from, कि टीचर आएगा, टीचर पढ़ाएगा. अब टीचर आता तो है अकॉर्डिंग टू देम, और टीचर आके कहता है कि वेल आई एम हियर टू हेल्प द ग्रुप टू रीच इट्स ओन गोल्स. अब वो अपना गोल तो डिस्क्राइब करेंगे नहीं, बिकॉज दे आर वेटिंग फॉर द टीचर. टीचर पढ़ाएगा, तब हम आगे बढ़ेंगे, तभी ग्रुप डायनामिक्स आगे बढ़ेगी. अब टीचर बार बार यही कहेगा, so they'll keep looking at the teacher. Now tell us what to do. The teacher will turn around and say, what would you like to do? है ना? So in the first 2 days, it's a tremendous tussle between the expectations of the participant and where the facilitator is leading them. Or what happens is, when they begin to talk of their back home situation, कि अरे फलान फलान ढमा, because they have to create a conversation in the initial stages. How do they create a conversation? So they will talk of something which is outside the room, because they're trying to run away from their feelings of being in the here and now. Here and now में तो हम लोगों ने कितने लोग हैं जिन्होंने सीखा है how to be in the here and now. If I ask you just now, what are your feelings? How are you feeling? What's happening to you right now? There would be very few people who would be able to tell me. They will tell me their thoughts, they will tell me their rationalizations, they will give me a huge philosophy of something or the other, right? So the trainer is leading them. the trainer is facilitating them to be in the here and now, but they are not able to see that this is what is happening. वो तो third day तक जाके उनको थोड़ा थोड़ा समझ में आता है कि क्या चल रहा है यहाँ पे, क्या प्रोसेस यहाँ पे चल रहा है, and how much the trainer is more with the session than they themselves are. So these activities are implemented in the first two stages of the change project. So when we do a micro lab, we definitely have a structured approach to it. And then we go on to the next part. These include disconfirming the validity of the status quo, or persuading employees to agree that the existing situation is not beneficial to them. Also, inducing guilt about the existing situation and actively engaging employees and leaders in identifying problems and solutions. They are most important in the unfreezing and moving stages. So if you do not involve people in identifying what is the problem, like for instance, I was doing this session with a organization which was celebrating Learning Week. And the theme was that preparing the workforce for tomorrow, future change or something like that, future of work and workforce. So obviously I'm a process trainer, so I'm going to focus on process only. And so I made them go through, I'm telling you the process of what I made them go through. I made them go through that what are the changes, what changes are being expected, and then what are they doing now? In terms of what jobs they expect to become redundant, what job roles do they expect to become redundant? What do they describe as future? What does future mean to you? Does it mean 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years? Who will make the change? So I asked them all these questions and they kept answering the questions. It was a very participating group, beautiful group. I thoroughly enjoyed it. So they kept participating. And then at one point I stopped and I said, so how are you feeling now? And then they filled the chat box with replies, which basically told them that this has created a sense of urgency in us, that if we don't do anything now, we are going to be grossly unprepared for the future, right? So, well, that worked with the group. I'm not saying that's the only way things work. There are several ways. You have to look at the group and then see how things will work. So we introduce activities in order to help people feel that guilt. So what are you doing now about it? Well, not much. So at least that realization, you raise awareness of people so that they get unfrozen from their present situation and they feel like moving. So what do you want to do? We need to do it urgently. Yeah. So this is what they told me. So we create psychological safety or reassure members that the desired change will be at no psychological cost, such as loss or humiliation to them. And it has been very, very facilitative to build trust and people can then move on. And this step stabilizes the organization at a new state of equilibrium because people have imbibed those changes, they have practiced, they have got feedback. on those changes, they find that it is helpful, and then it begins to describe the organization's new culture, norms, policies, and structure. In the third or refreezing step, the planned change is integrated into the organizational values and traditions to stabilize the new quasi equilibrium state and prevent regression to the previous problem situation. So these are the three stages. Now, uh, so what is important at the refreezing stage is that the top management, in if we are talking of organizational change, that the top management accepted the policies are in line with the changes that are being made and the practices that are followed. Now, I'll tell you something very typical that happens. So when you talk of the organizational values, the printed organizational value of the organization can be teamwork, that we value collaborative processes. We value teamwork. And then when you are doing your performance appraisal, what are you measuring the person on? You are measuring the person on his individual performance, right? So you can keep singing the tune of teamwork, but at the end of the day, what is the person going to look at? This person is going to look at the fact that I am going to get appraised on individual performance and not on team performance. It's a classic case of the policy not being aligned to the stated value. So therefore, it is important that in the performance appraisal, we say that we are appraising you for how you have performed as a member and what contribution have you made to this particular team in which you are working. And that becomes an important part of the appraisal. Only then will the shift in people's behavior take place, right? So in order to refreeze, it is important. Otherwise, they will attend a team building workshop, team working workshop. They will make all kinds of promises. And yet, when the appraisal time comes, you disregard all that and you see only individual performance. Next time, there's going to be no teamwork. People are going to undercut one another. They are going to compete with one another. They are going to use the team to do the work and yet go to the boss and say, you know, I was the one. So this typical dialogue you will keep hearing. Now, what Kurt Lewin said was that in order to make this change process from unfreezing to moving to refreezing happen, there are 4 kinds of roles which are very important for every change process that we do. So you need the change sponsor, the change agent, the change advocate, and the change participant. So the change sponsor is the individual or group with the power to determine that change will occur. They are responsible to introduce the change and legitimize it by using their organizational power and influence to legitimize the change. So this is mostly performed by the top management. So when the top management supports the change, they say that this is what we want to change, either the organization structure or the process in which a certain department is going to be run or the organization is going to be run. So this has to have the support of the top management, particularly when we are talking of, actually all structures are the same. So it does need a top management support. And then you need the change agent, the individual or the group responsible for seeing that a previously determined change occur. They design and implement or help to implement the change. The role of the change agent is normally performed by middle or lower level administration. So I'm talking of one organization because your thing is put on YouTube. So I'm restrained to that extent to not take names and not. There was an organization, and in order to make the organization effective, uh, they uh, had a very interesting process of change. So they suddenly decided that there would be about 10, 12 departments which would undergo a change. Very good change, according to me, very well thought out change, much needed change. But how was it implemented? So what they did was that they divided the structure of the organization into the products. So supposing they had 15 products, they uh, they said that now for this product, this will, we have created a new group. Then for this product, we have created a new group. So like that, they created 12 separate groups. And each group had its own HR, had its own marketing, it had its own finance. So it worked like a separate unit in itself. And then they picked up people from all over the organization to put it into these verticals, which was in the main office in one location. So what happened after that? Something which is so good on paper, so perfect, discussed in the C-suite, discussed with the board, everyone has agreed. How was it executed? A circular was sent. A circular was sent, and then a circular was sent. A new head was brought. What was the reference point for the head? The circular. What was the reference point for the team members? The circular. And since people were dislocated, what happened? A lot of people went through personal inconveniences in order to get into the group. Okay, somehow or the other, they left their families behind. They came against all resistances. The company spent huge amount of money on their transfers. And when they came and they asked the boss, what do we do? What are we to do? The boss said, read the circular. When they went to the head of the heads who had taken out the circular, he said, we have already written everything in the circular. So what did that person on the top do? He said, मुझे तो समझ में ही नहीं आता है ये सर्कुलर में लिखा क्या है, तो वो 20 दिन की छुट्टी पे चला गया. अब वो 20 दिन की छुट्टी पे चला गया, 1 महीने की छुट्टी पे चला गया, उसके पीछे तो क्या हुआ होगा, you can also imagine. And then in the next meeting, the head came and got fired for not implementing the change. And he said, sir, मैं क्या implement करूं, मुझे खुद ही नहीं समझ में आया. He said, उसके बाद उन्होंने 4 कागज और निकाल दिए. उन्होंने कहा हमने अब ये कंपनी के पोर्टल पे ये 4 कागज डाल दिए कि आपको करना क्या है. अब वो जो उन्होंने लिखा वो और कंफ्यूजन क्रिएट कर गया और कोई था ही नहीं चीजों को क्लैरिफाई करने के लिए. You see, so When you are making such large scale changes and all at once, imagine 12 products you are making, how many people you have shifted, how much process you have shifted around. It was discussed with. Nobody knew. Huh? So, us confusion where people somehow started operating and things started to happen. Right. So, therefore, of course, the top management is very important, but at the same time, they need to talk, convince, have a group which knows exactly what needs to be done. They need to have the buy-in. Only then can they communicate with the other people and act as agents of change. Yes, Sonal.
Ma'am, the example which you recently cited, so is it like everyone was the change participant with no clarity of change sponsor or the advocate or the agent? So everyone was primarily change participant. Is it like if I understood?
Yeah. So they did not have a change agent. Change sponsor to clear था, है ना?
Sorry, change sponsor was there. So change agent and advocate was missing.
Yeah, advocate was also missing, right?
Right.
Nobody to advocate, and everyone was a participant, right?
Right, ma'am. Right.
So whenever anybody was asked, and like at one point in time, I also went and I spoke to the head, and I said to them that, sir, at least address the. At that time, I was second in command or whatever. So I said, okay, at least talk to the people, tell them what they need to do. And but anyway, okay, so whatever. But everybody was a change participant. So इस तरह का जो change होता है ना? So we see why these four, uh, key players are necessary for the change process to happen, right? And then all roles act interdependently in all the three stages: unfreezing, transition, refreezing of the change process. But certain roles are more critical at specific stages of the change project. So, for instance, at the beginning stage, the change sponsor and the change agents are the most important. And then later on, it is the change advocates and the change participants who are more important. So this post field analysis can be used for individuals or individual change or for organizations. And the driving forces are usually positive, reasonable, logical, conscious, and economic. And the restraining forces are usually negative, emotional, illogical, unconscious, and social, psychological. They are irrational, illogical, because a person can keep giving you all the rational on earth for why they are not changing, but they are not understanding that deep down there is a fear of breaking through the status quo, which they are not confronting in themselves. That is about the only reason, leaving the comfort zone. So, if the forces outside offset one another, then the result is equilibrium and status quo. Change is brought about by increasing the driving force or reducing the restraining forces. So diagrammatically, it is represented like this. So what we do is that this is the tool for making decisions by analyzing the forces for and against change, and for communicating the reasoning behind your decisions. So what we do is that whatever you want to propose as change, you write in the middle, and then you see what are the forces which uh, resist and what are the forces which drive the change, which can be internal to the person, to the organization, and external to the person, to the organization. And internal drivers could include outdated machinery or product lines, declining team morale, a need to increase profitability, and your external drivers could include a volatile, uncertain operating environment, disruptive technologies, changing demographic needs. And so the first tip in preparing this chart, which I showed you, this one, is uh, to identify as many of the factors that will influence the change as you can, and where appropriate, involve other people, such as team members or experts in your organization. And the tip two is the following questions may help you to identify forces that will influence the change. What business benefit will change deliver? Who supports the change? Who is against it? Why are they against it? This exploration has to take place. Yeah. That, okay, so if there is silence in the group, at least tell me, why are you silent? Huh? So that's how you know at what level to work with the group. So, do you have the resources to make the change work? What costs and risks are involved? What business processes will be affected? Tools such as impact analysis, what if analysis, stakeholder analysis, brainstorming can help with this step. When you have identified the forces that are driving change, add them to the left side of your force field. Then, in the same way, identify forces that are against change. Now, brainstorming the forces that resist or are unfavorable to change. Internal resistors and restrainers could include fear of the unknown. At least this is a known level. Existing organizational structures. Like for one, for people to transition from classroom training to online training, there was so much of difficulty in the beginning. That's not how we do it here, attitudes. And external factors may be existing commitments to partner organizations, government legislation, obligations towards your customers. Now add the forces against change to the right side of your force field analysis and score each in terms of their weakness or strengths and the degree of influence each one has, and then add up the scores for and against them. And for a visual representation of the influence that each force has, draw arrows around them. Use bigger arrows for forces that will have a greater influence on the change, and smaller arrows for forces that will have a weaker influence. And then you can have something like this. So the goal that they want to achieve in this is upgrade factory with new manufacturing equipment. What are the requirements? What are the forces for change? Customer wants new products, improve production speed, reducing training time, low maintenance cost. And what are the forces? Loss of staff over time. This is a very big resistance. So they will deliberately not do the work during the working hours and keep it so that keep it pending for days when they are not working so that they are called on overtime. And if you are going to upgrade it with new manufacturing technology, it means that their overtime is going to get reduced and that's not okay. And then you have staff fearful of new technology, and this is the way we have always done it. Uh, they're not sure what impact it will have on the environment, the cost of installing the machinery, and the disruption. So if we see how he has done the force field analysis here, is that the forces for change are 10, whereas the forces against the change are 11. So therefore, the OD specialist will work to reduce the forces against change and work to increase the forces for change. So step 5 is analyze and apply. So now that you have done your force field analysis, you can use it in two ways: to decide whether or not to move forward with the decision or change, to think about the supportive forces you can strengthen, and which opposing or resisting forces you can weaken, and how to make the change more successful. If you had to implement the project, for example, above, the analysis might suggest a number of changes that you could make to the initial plan. For instance, you could train staff to minimize the fear of technology. The plus one cost of training increases cost to -4, but the -2 benefit reduces staff fearfulness to new technology. 2 - 1 shows staff that change is necessary for business survival. Plus, this new +2 force supports the change. Now, staff that show staff that new machines would introduce variety and interest to their jobs. This new +1 force supports the change. Raise wages to reflect new productivity. The +1 cost of raising wages takes cost to -5, but the -2 benefit reduces loss of overtime to -1. Install slightly different machines with filters that eliminate pollution. The -1 benefit of the new machine eliminates impact on environment as a force for change. And this will tilt the balance in favor of the plan. So now I want you to do an exercise, and this exercise is that imagine you are the project manager of a supermarket which is responsible for uh, implementing, installing a new MIS system. And referring to the example above, draw a force field analysis of the project. So I don't know who is here from ISTD.
Ma'am, Alok this said, ma'am, I'm making you a host. You can create the breakout rooms.
Okay, fine.
Ma'am, you can go with the breakout rooms.
Yeah, okay. So in your groups, kindly share. So just take a picture of, first take a picture of this quickly. So I'm going to make only 2 rooms, and I hope that you will unmute yourself and talk in your groups. So what you have to make is the force field analysis diagram of this kind. Right? That introduction of MIS in the center, and then you can write the forces for and forces against. It's an imaginative exercise, but it will help you. Is it okay? So I will make, so we have 15 minutes, so take 10 minutes and then both the groups, if you can make a PPT, that will be good. If you can't make it, that's fine, I'll understand. But at least be able to have a leader and who will come and share on behalf of the group. Follow me, are you not able to join? Samad? So welcome back. And I hope you could discuss something at least.
Yes, ma'am.
Right. So who's going to share? Group one, who's going to share?
I think Ms. Bhardwaj, I'll take it forward. So it was Mr. Kumar, Ms. Chakravarti, and I was there. The fourth member left. So what we decided, MIS as a structure that we implementing or putting it forward will definitely add value to the system in terms of giving better reporting, while it's definitely going to be a little costlier against the older one. But then it will give us improved structures and improved reporting, which will help us in terms of bringing the better analysis on the board, which will help people to drive work better because it'll structure it's structuralize the entire workflow. Number two, force of change will also bring a lot of people to learn a new thing and which will add into their profile as a candidature. So maybe if in case they look forward tomorrow to walk out of an organization of this supermarket and join any other supermarket, they can always say that they worked on Workday as an application for MIS. Against, it'll definitely add some insecurity to people. To add that in a force, we've designed it to a way that since it's a new structure, we need more hands on deck to learn the reporting structure. Hence, nobody would lose job. And we will align people to from learning and delivery of the system for people to learn better. And it'll definitely generate a lot of extra revenue from a time. The way you look at a better reporting structure will give you a better analysis in terms of where your revenue is coming from and where your expenditures are going.
Right. So these were the factors that you discussed, which oppose
Yes,
and which support
correct.
the introduction. Very nice. Thank you so much. Wonderful. Big hand for the group.
Thank you, ma'am.
And then group two.
Yeah, ma'am, the factors which we discussed for the change in the force field analysis, though I've made the diagram, but it's very rough. I'm unable to show right now. So one is it would, the forces for the change is the quality of decision, which will enable the management for this particular change to happen in the supermarket. There would be better communication. The productivity of the employees can be traced. It would definitely give the supermarket the competitive advantage over other players in the vicinity, and there would be transparency of the data overall. So these are the five forces, and as per my marking, it is coming to 15, 15. And the forces against the change is I we have given the maximum marks to technology apprehension, which is at 4. Then is the funding at number 3, because there are apprehensions that it would be a costly affair. From where would the fund come? How would the money be spared? Then there are two factors which are at number 3 and number 2. One is changing roles and norms. With this particular system in place, there would be a lot of roles and responsibilities that would be changed. So people would be, the staff would be apprehensive for the change. Lack of knowledge to handle it. So people would be, the workforce would be apprehensive. How would they handle it with no knowledge at all? And lastly is with the technology coming in, a lot of experienced but older generation staff would be on, we would be on the verge of losing them. So my total marks against the forces are coming to 14 and 4 are coming to 15 in this force field analysis.
Good.
Thank
So
you.
thank you so much. Thank you to both the groups and big hand. And the idea was just to give you a feel of, because you had told me in the beginning that how change happens and how to make it happen and things like that. So this kind of analysis is helpful in the beginning for change. And that is what we studied today was Kurt Lewin's model of change. and what are all the steps and processes which are involved. So, if there is anything anyone wants to add,
Ma'am,
otherwise,
I wanted to ask you, how are we giving those scores, for each of the factors that we are mentioning, and we are giving 3, 4, 5. So we are doing it from our mind only, how we feel. So we rate it accordingly.
yeah.
Or
Yeah,
is
you'll,
there
you'll
any
also
other?
take, yeah, you'll also take the group score. How does the group view? What are the factors which will be more, uh, which will be less? Because, and then you can do an average. It's up to you. It's up to the group. See, these are all perceptions, no? Perception based. What you perceive will be the change that will happen, the resistances or the 4 factors. And different people within the group where you're brainstorming will perceive it differently. So you have to come to a consensus. Which are the biggest blockers? How can we tackle them? Okay,
Okay, ma'am.
thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank
Thank you so
you.
much, ma'am. Thank you.